Thank you, Kent, and thank you so much, Grant and Louise, for bringing us all together again today. Second year running for the Future of Medicine Conference. It's great to be here. I really mean that. For the first time, I feel as though I'm preaching to the choir. We're all here for one reason, because we want a healthier future for medicine. We all know there should be more. I'm going to make the case that positive medicine provides that more. So where did we go wrong? Some say it was in August 1857. Louis Pasteur and Antoine Béchamp were scientists working for the sugar beet industry in France, and they were working on why sugar beet spoils when it's exposed to air and it goes moldy. Pasteur was presenting. Béchamp is sat at the back. As Pasteur's talking, he starts to recognize some of the themes. He gets up and he walks down and he sits on the front row. Pasteur talks about his theory that the spoiling is due to a process that he calls fermentation, and he attributes it to a germ called the yeast. When he finished, Béchamp stood up and said, "Mon Dieu, you have stolen my idea." Pasteur says, "Mais non, you have stolen my idea." And so began a lifelong rivalry between these two eminent men. Both of them set off on a journey of considering the implications of their findings for human disease. And let's remember, in those days, the majority of human disease was actually infectious disease. Pasteur said, human disease, infectious disease, is caused by the germ. Béchamp said, yeah, there are germs, but actually the most important thing is what the human body is doing, what's happening inside the terrain. They had a colleague, Claude Bernard, who was a physiologist. He could see both sides of the argument. He actually tried to convince Pasteur that, yeah, Béchamp had a point. He didn't refer to it as the terrain. He called it the milieu intérieur, the internal environment. Bernard's work on self-regulation of the body to maintain stability in the face of changing circumstances led to homeostasis, and he is credited as being the father of homeostasis. Pasteur, as we know, became the father of the germ theory. Béchamp faded into insignificance, but his ideas never quite disappeared. Of course, we've got to have the germ and the terrain. It's not one or the other, it's not either or, it's both and. And the more that's missing from medicine has to include the terrain. That's the missing piece. What is happening in the individual body? But all of this led to the war on the germ. And by the time we got to 1922, Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin, the game was on, and the war was being lost by the germ. This set the scene for 1971, and President Richard Nixon announcing a massive increase in funding and new research establishments dedicated to finding the cure for cancer within the next 5 years. By the time I got to medical school in 1979, the wars were raging, and I was taught all about medical science. Everything I taught was science, and it was all about how medical science is going to cure cancer and heart disease and diabetes. It was only a matter of time. We actually had to wait until 2003 before we cured heart disease. And in 2003, in a series of articles in the British Medical Journal, it was announced that the polypill was going to make heart attacks rare. The poly pill, being a combination of aspirin, an antihypertensive, and a statin, was going to be given to everyone aged 55 and above. And that was the end of heart disease. Yay! Let's do a case study. Let's go back to 1968. It's the most recent case I can find. No, it's not. James D'Angelo, a 65-year-old man, admitted to the Veterans Administration Hospital in Massachusetts for a routine cholecystectomy. He was admitted by a young surgical resident, Dr. Steve Rosenberg, who took his history. In that history, D'Angelo told him that 12 years previously, he had been in the same hospital for a partial gastrectomy for stomach cancer. However, at surgery, he was found to be riddled with multiple metastases, and his liver was shot. He was sewn up and sent home to die. None of this rang true to Dr. Rosenberg, who got the records out and looked back, and sure enough, it was all true. He had been sent home to die. He didn't let go of this. He gave it great thought. He contemplated the question, what happened to this guy? What happened to this guy's cancer? And he concluded, incredibly presciently, that the man's own immune system had got rid of his stage 4 cancer. And he devoted his career to the question of how we can find a cure for cancer by developing drugs. That led to the whole concept of immunotherapy in cancer. And recently, an editorial has suggested that immunotherapy might be beneficial in up to 80% of cases of cancer. 18%, 1-8, not 80. There's a problem here. Germ thinking, Pasteur's germ thinking looks for an enemy. It looks for something we can fight. It looks to address that question, how can we cure? Whereas actually, terrain thinking, Beaumont's thinking, says, why did he heal? Rosenberg was so close. He asked that question, but then immediately went on to say, how can we cure? How can we use the fact that his immune system had done the work to actually activate the immune system with drugs? That is the more question. That is a question that positive medicine addresses. When I considered what I was comparing to, positive medicine versus Western medicine versus traditional medicine, I settled on conventional medicine. What does that mean? Conventional means the way we do things, the way we've always done things. That's the problem. We've always done germ thinking, and that's how it is to this day. Whereas positive medicine does more. Conventional medicine focuses on the disease and curing. Positive medicine on health and healing. There's nothing wrong with the medical model. The medical model is actually essential. It is necessary but not sufficient. We need the more. We need germ plus terrain thinking. We need to stop being focused on the disease, evidence-based medicine, clinical pathways. How do we manage type 2 diabetes? How do we manage stage 4 glioblastoma multiforme? What about the person? We have to look at the person. We have to say, why this person? Why this disease now? Where's it come from? How do we cure it? Maybe. How do we help them heal? Definitely. Conventionally, it's totally reactive. We know that. We need to move into the proactive and preventative space, which is what we're doing. Conventional medicine is focused on an outcome that is the absence of disease and coping. At Positive Medicine, we're focused on whole person health and thriving, being the best we can be, just like Kent is today. And to be honest, looking at you lot right now, a lot of you have turned up in exactly that same space. That's where we need to be. This is all captured within the Mari model of health, Te Whare Tapa Whā, the 4 pillars of health: physical health, psychological health, emotional health, our whānau and our relationships, and spiritual health. And spiritual health, we do not shy away from tackling spiritual health, which so many people do. Spiritual health is all about, well, it's the health of the spirit. It's the health of the essence of who we are. It's what brings meaning and purpose to life. It's about our connection with self, with others, with nature and the land, our whenua, and potentially with something beyond, some kind of organizing force within the universe. Call it what you like. I'm proud to say that Sir Mason Jury, who described Te Whare Tapa Whā in 1984, wrote the foreword to my book, Positive Medicine, Disrupting the Future of Medical Practice. It's unapologetically disruptive. It is positively disruptive. It calls for more. It calls for whole person health and healing. When it was accepted for publication, I was talking about the topics in the book, and Fulton Hogan approached me. I'm an occupational physician. I work in a number of New Zealand's major employers. Fulton Hogan said, would you work with us to develop a group program for positive medicine? Because at that time, I was only working with individual clients. So we did. We developed it together, and we called it Project Me. Be the project manager of your own life. I've come to realize that a kind of mantra that we developed actually captures every single one of the principles of positive medicine. My life, my health, my choices determine my future. My choices determine my future is a truism. It's a statement that is so true and so obvious that it doesn't even need stating, except that so many people don't realize that it applies to them. But let's just think. Every decision, every choice you ever made in your life has led to this moment. This, here and now, and the reason you're here. Same with every choice, every decision you will make from here. It will lead to where you are in 6 months' time, in 6 years' time, in 16 years' time. It's all about choices. Over the last 20 plus years, I've been considering the root cause of disease. I've been considering medical practice, but I've even been wondering about what is health. As a medical student, I was taught that health is the absence of disease. And that's always been not enough. But what I didn't know until much later was that the question of the definition of health was being debated internationally. And in 2011, Machteld Huber and colleagues published a paper which was the result of an international symposium on the definition of health. Health, they said, is the ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of life's challenges. It's a dynamic process that is changing all the time. We have to adapt to life. Professor Sir Michael Marmot took that one stage further, and his work on the Whitehall studies identified that a primary determinant of health is the level of control you believe you have over your own life. This leads us to the word self-efficacy, which is a word that psychologists use to mean an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control where you believe that life happens to you and you're a victim of life's circumstances. Sense of agency, self-determination, a feeling of autonomy. I'm in control here. I believe that I have control over my own life. My destiny is in my own hands, and I determine my future. All of these concepts involve this other concept, which is self-responsibility. This is the biggest gap in our current process of the doctor-patient relationship, of the healthcare professional-patient relationship. It's who takes responsibility for a person's health. Radically, it belongs to the person. It belongs to me. Positive medicine is a concept and philosophy that's described in the book. It's a process and experience that's captured within Project Me. It includes the medical model plus principles of positive psychology, which, to be honest with you, although positive psychology was only started in 2000 by Professor Martin Seligman, the whole concept of positive psychology draws on the principles of the Greco-Roman and Eastern philosophers, and particularly the Stoics. It's all in there. The indigenous wisdom, of course, is the Maori model of health, Te Whare Tapa Whā. The experience people describe to us is one of gaining clarity as they go through the process. They get insights, they have revelations, they get realizations and even epiphanies. This has been transformational. This has changed my life. And it is a way of life. It's a way of life that I live to every single day. I look at my 4 pillars, I look at my plan every single day. The goal is whole person health and healing. Just going back to healing in cancer, we've already talked about the lack of the terrain thinking in immunotherapy, as exciting as it is. And let's turn to another therapy which is showing great promise in the management of cancer, and that is metabolic therapy. And this is all terrain thinking. This is how we can support the patient to make choices regarding their nutrition. You're going to hear so much about that over the next 2 days. But what we've realized through research is that the goal is aimed at mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondrion is the powerhouse of the cell. It is where nutrition is processed and turned into energy that can be used by the cell and the whole of the body. Metabolic dysfunction is at the heart of the 4 major killer diseases of Western society: cancer, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I call them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they carry away so many of us. This is apocalyptic. But underlying all of these conditions is immune dysfunction and metabolic dysfunction, particularly mitochondrial dysfunction. In fact, this has led a number of people to say that these 4 conditions, these 4 groups of conditions, type 2 diabetes, of course, synonymous with the metabolic syndrome, all 4 of these conditions are actually different manifestations of the same disease process. There are so many similarities once we get down to the immune level and the mitochondrial level. What if they're actually the same disease manifesting in different ways? A lot of the thinking around this comes from neuroscience, from psychoneuroimmunology. Psychoneuroimmunology explains the mind-body connection. Our thoughts impact on our nervous system, impact on our immune system. In fact, let's give it its full title, Psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology, because it also impacts on the endocrine system, which is how it ties in nutrition and metabolism. Actually, let's just call it neuroscience. Neuroscience also explains why self-efficacy leads to whole person health and healing. It leads to the possibility of what we're calling autonomous healing. Healing that is under my control and conscious. It's a conscious decision. Healing that is deliberate. Let's take a person with immune dysfunction and metabolic dysfunction of whatever form. Doesn't matter which of those 4 forms of the four horsemen that they have. And let's add self-efficacy. What if that leads to immune optimization and metabolic health? Huge amount of research out there to say that's exactly what happens. It's not just self-efficacy, because they also need the knowledge and understanding and actually the motivation to apply these principles. I haven't got time to go through the mechanisms that demonstrate why self-efficacy leads to immune optimization, metabolic health, and autonomous healing. The roots come from neuroscience, but also Antonovsky's salutogenic theory of health, in which he describes the health-ease, dis-ease continuum. The sympathetic-parasympathetic balance is absolutely paramount. So much of our lives is spent in sympathetic arousal and fight, flight, or freeze. What do? I'm a freezer, actually. I freeze. Instead, we need to shift into the parasympathetic, into rest, digest, and restore. The clue's in there, isn't it? All of this has a mechanism in epigenetics. We could spend a whole 2-day conference on epigenetics, the upregulation and downregulation of genes in health and disease. But all roads lead to homeostasis. Homeostasis is where we create the circumstances for healing. Homeostasis, a process the body goes through to react to external circumstances in a self-regulating manner. Nothing needs to happen to the body to maintain stability as those conditions change. The body is an amazing healing machine. We all know that. Physiologist Professor David Beaumont wrote an amazing paper on homeostasis, the underappreciated and far too often ignored central organizing principle of physiology. The disruption of homeostatic mechanisms is what leads to disease. Effective therapy must be directed towards re-establishing these homeostatic conditions, working with rather than against nature. In other words, re-establishing homeostasis leads to healing. Of course it does. That's what the body does when we're resting and restoring. Healing, what is healing? Well, the root of the word healing actually means to make whole. And suddenly we've come back round to whole person health. Our aim, particularly by using Tefari Tapafar, is to help people find their wholeness. Of course, positive medicine is a coaching model. Of course, I've now moved away from telling people what to do to coaching them to find their own answers. The answers are always within. Our job as healthcare professionals of whatever kind we are in the audience today is to coach people to build whole person health, to find their own whole person health, and create their circumstances for their own healing, whatever form that needs to take. And let's just have an incredibly broad definition of what the word healing means in the context of a person's own life. That's the more. That's the more we've been looking for. That's the more that's missing from healthcare and medicine currently. Autonomous healing in prediabetes, another case study. Those of you who heard me present in February to the pre-cure community will know this is my chart of my HbA1c from 2013 to 2023. Just to add, Grant spotted it's going up. In 2013, I exceeded the cutoff limit for prediabetes with a level of 42. My doctor said we'll have to monitor that. In 2013, my level was 47. My doctor said we'll have to monitor that. And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, he's waiting until I hit 50 when I've got type 2 diabetes and he can start me on metformin. This is not good enough. So I took measures into my own hand, and I went to see Dr. Glenn Davis, New Zealand GP of the Year last year, and Glenn said, it's really easy, actually. You just need to go on a keto diet. And he said, and here's the evidence why. So he gave me the knowledge, and he spent an hour explaining it to me. He gave me the understanding, and then he gave me the motivation by introducing me to Jala Dyer, New Zealand Health Coach of the Year, who worked with me to help me find the motivation to do what I needed to do. I recall many times saying to her, what is it you're doing? I thought you were meant to be a health coach. I'm coming up with all the answers. Within 3 weeks, I kid you not, within 3 weeks, I had reversed my prediabetes to 40. 6 months later, and I'd lost 10 kgs, and my HbA1c was 34. I was absolutely jubilant. And do you know who did that? I did. That was self-efficacy. That was deliberate healing. That was autonomous healing. So what are we doing now at Positive Medicine? My team is sat here. Some of my team are sat here. We're implementing Project Me into the major New Zealand companies I work with. We're implementing Project Me into primary care. For the first time ever this year, my dream has come to fruition. And we're working with Dr. Andrew Corrin at Family Doctors in Bethlehem, and he is researching the hell out of it, because he's a researcher as well. And he's actually presenting his research to the World Organization of Family Doctors in Sydney next month. And this shows significant increases in self-efficacy from a group of patients that he took through Project Me. We've developed a positive medicine practitioner training program, which we're now introducing. We're creating an international learning community. We're learning every step of the way. We've found great interest in this concept amongst doctors in America, interestingly. Their system is so broken that they are desperate for more. But we're also asking the question, what if? What if even a fraction of what I've said to you today is correct? Let me tell you, I absolutely believe every single word I've said, and this does have the potential to revolutionize healthcare. I'm personally not going to stop until I've got as far as I can down that road. But what else we're doing now is building a tribe, a whānau, to join us on that journey towards revolutionizing healthcare to enable whole person health and healing. Thank you.